disappearance. And today we'll hear about after Srila Prabhupada was placed in Samadhi. Here, this is an early picture of the construction of Prabhupada's Samadhi. We'll see many more pictures today. This is Rabi Swami with the workers and the design. And this is a artist's conception of the Samadhi. Now when Srila Prabhupada left, he left a will. Always when someone leaves this world, the people who he leaves behind, they see his will. So Srila Prabhupada's will was written in June of 1977 while he was here at the Krishna Balaram Mandir. I, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, settler of the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, and disciple of Om Vishnupad, 108 Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada, presently residing at Sri Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, make this my last will. Number 1, the governing body commission, GBC, will be the ultimate managing authority of the entire International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Number 2, each temple will be an Iskcon property and will be managed by 3 executive directors. The system of management will continue as it is now, and there is no need of any change. Properties in India will be managed by the following executive directors, and then Prabhupada gives a list of first Mayapur, and included with Mayapur is Panihati, Haridaspur and Calcutta, then Vrindavan, Guru Kripa Swami, Akshayananda Swami, and Gopal Krishna Das Adhikari. And Bombay, Bhubaneswar, Hyderabad. So these were the 4 temples that Prabhupada had, major temples that Prabhupada had in Bombay when he wrote this will. The executive directors who have herein been designated are appointed for life. In the event of the death or failure to act for any reason of any of the said directors, a successor director or directors may be appointed by the remaining directors, provided the new director is my initiated disciple, following strictly all the rules and regulations of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness as detailed in my books, and provided that there are never less than 3 or more than 5 executive directors acting at one time. Then Prabhupada goes on to explain how nothing can be sold, mortgaged, borrowed against, transferred, disposed of, in any way encumbered or alienated. And this direction is irrevocable. Then Prabhupada went on to describe how the temples outside of India should be allocated. So he went on to America, the different parts of America, the Pacific, then Australia, England, and parts of Europe, his African temples, his South American temples, Central American temples, Canadian temples, the West Coast of America, East Coast of America, Iran, and the Washington, D.C. area and a few other places, depending upon who the GBCs were, because the GBCs had sometimes not all in one zone, they were mixed. New Vrindavan area, Southern America, Fiji. And then Prabhupada, he did something very special. He allotted for his former family. I declare, say, and confirm that all the properties, both movable and immovable, which stand in my name, including current accounts, savings accounts, fixed deposits in various banks, are the properties and assets of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and the heirs and successors of my previous life, or anyone claiming through them, have no right, claim, or interest in these properties whatsoever, save and except as provided hereafter. And then Prabhupada made a provision for his family. Although the money which is in my personal name in different banks is being spent for Iskcon and belongs to Iskcon, I have kept a few deposits specifically marked for allocating a monthly allowance of rupees 1,000 each to the members of my former family, 2 sons, 2 daughters, and wife. He had 3 sons, one of the sons had died. After the deaths of the members of my former family, these specific deposits, corpus, interest, and savings, will become the property of Iskcon for the corpus of the trust, and the descendants of my former family or anybody claiming through them shall not be allowed any further allowance. Then he assigned the executors of his will, Guru Kripa Swami, Hridayananda Goswami, Tamal Krishna Goswami, Rameshwar Swami, Gopal Krishna Das Adhikari, Jai Tirtha Das Adhikari, and Giriraj Das Brahmachari. And he signed this on the 4th day of June 1977, while he was still in possession of full sense and sound mind, without any persuasion, force, or compulsion from anybody. Then they have the witnesses. So this was Prabhupada's will. It was long before his health had made such a bad turn. And this will was upheld. It was also confirmed by the Indian government when the family challenged it just after Prabhupada left. And Prabhupada's elder son made a case against Iskcon, saying that everything was the property of the family. It was this will that saved Iskcon from being taken over by his former family. Prabhupada previously had 5 children. Then he said he had 5,000 children, all of his disciples. So he spoke about that quite often. So this is Prabhupada's will. But while I was going through looking for this will, I found something very interesting that I had never seen before. It had a very deep impression on me that I would like to share with all of you. There was a letter that was sent to all of the temples around the world in October of 1977. Let's get this. Yes. I had never seen this letter before today. Prabhupada had wanted the disciples to come and be with him here, and many of them did come when it was first announced, but then they went back to all of their centers. So this is a letter to all the Iskcon centers. Urgent, urgent, please read at once. Dear Prabhus, please accept my most humble obeisances in the dust of your feet. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. It is my unhappy duty to notify you of a most disturbing situation that has developed regarding Srila Prabhupada's condition. Below are excerpts from the diary of Srila Prabhupada's personal secretary, as read to me by phone by Hari Sori Prabhu. They refer to conversations in Vrindavan on October 25th, 1977. So this was about 3 weeks before Srila Prabhupada disappeared. Scene: Prabhupada's room. His Divine Grace is resting. Bharadraj and Hansaduta Swami are sitting silently in the room. Prabhupada awakens. Prabhupada to Upendra: so everyone has left? Yes. I feel very unhappy when no one is here. They are avoiding me. They do not want to come. Upendra: Bharadraj and Hansaduta Swami are here. Do you want Kirtan? Prabhupada: at least japa while I sleep. When I look around, I see the room is empty and I feel very unhappy. When I see no one around me, then I feel lonely. Bharadraj: we'll get some others and Hansaduta Swami and I will do Kirtan. Prabhupada: why not all of you? You cannot all do Kirtan? Why not others? Scene: Prabhupada's room. Sometime later, Prabhupada has stopped eating all solid foods and is not even taking medicines. It is evident that His Divine Grace is discouraged. A Treya Rishi arrives from Tehran. Prabhupada: please don't leave me here. Keep me surrounded. That will encourage me. You keep me surrounded and chant Hare Krishna. There is very little hope for my life. Chant Hare Krishna softly all together. Do not leave. Now I have become poisonous. Everyone is avoiding me. Things are deteriorating. What is to be done? What is the use? Everything is frustrated. Scene: Prabhupada's room. His Divine Grace was planning to go to Mayapur, but the trip is cancelled. What happened was, because the doctor, the Kaviraj from Calcutta, he needed to go back to take care of his patients there. So the devotees thought, because it was that time of year again when the weather becomes nice in Mayapur, it starts to get cold here, they thought they would rent a whole plane, or they bought, what they ended up doing was they bought 10 tickets for Prabhupada's whole party in a plane. And they rented a Mercedes-Benz to come from Delhi on that day of the flight. The first thing that happened to the car was it got a flat tire, so he had to fix that, and then it ran out of gas. So he got here late, and because of that, the whole trip had to be cancelled. So then Prabhupada, he showed to the devotees that, no, do not take me anywhere, just keep me here. So this is His Divine Grace was planning to go to Mayapur, but the trip is cancelled because His Divine Grace feels it would be too risky and he doesn't have sufficient strength. Instead, he decides to be taken out to see the deities of Krishna Balaram. This is when Prabhupada was going on the parikrama every day. Yes. Prabhupada: I want to go on parikrama. By parikrama, even if I die, that is good luck. Arrange like that with kirtan. I may die or live, it doesn't matter. Better than dying by jerking of an airplane. Hari Sori: for us it matters. Prabhupada: what can be done? From the above excerpts, we can all appreciate the situation in Vrindavan very clearly. The only medicine Prabhupada is taking is kirtan and being surrounded by his loving disciples. There is no other way to encourage Prabhupada to stay in this world and continue leading us personally. After discussions with most of the GBC representatives in America, South America, and Europe, I would like to urge all temples to act immediately as follows. From every corner of the world, temples should send for men, at least 1 or 2 men, immediately to Vrindavan for the month of November. In December, send replacements if the first men cannot stay longer than 1 month. These men will have the unique privilege of being with Prabhupada 6 to 8 hours a day, daily, chanting, massaging, hearing His Divine Grace translate, carrying His Divine Grace on parikrama, etc. They will have the great responsibility of encouraging Srila Prabhupada by serving him personally in this way with devotion and love. So we saw last night how the room, when Prabhupada was leaving, it was full of devotees, because from this letter, all the devotees started arriving so that they could all chant for Prabhupada. Every temple should increase their kirtan program to 24-hour kirtan if possible. Prabhupada is personally present in each temple and can receive the encouragement and love of his disciples who surround his Vyasasana in the temples around the world to petition the Lord for his health to be returned. Special Sankirtan marathon should be planned and all devotees should participate for petitioning the Lord to please cure his pure devotee. Remember, Sankirtan is the best process for petitioning the Lord in this age. And then he went on to give further plans. In January they would start alternating the devotees coming. Finally, I would humbly remind all temples that there shouldn't be one moment's hesitation or delay in sending men immediately for November and December. How can we forget that all the money in Iskcon is Srila Prabhupada's money, and all the time is meant for serving him, that he is in need of personal service right at his bedside, and we must hasten to his call. And more plans were made. So this was written by Rameshwar Swami at the request of the devotees here. One senior GBC man commented that if we don't send senior men to be with Prabhupada at this time, it is practically demoniac. So a lot of devotees arrived at that time, and then after Prabhupada was placed in Samadhi, they were going to have a memorial 3 days later. So all the devotees who could possibly arrive within those 3 days came. They booked a whole bogie from Bombay, and all the devotees all over India came, and as many as possible from the West also came. So this letter, with the strength of this letter, then many devotees came to be with Prabhupada at this time. So now we have Srila Prabhupada, after he was placed in Samadhi, and the pole was put on top of Prabhupada's head, then 2 more poles were put to make a triangle, and on those 2 front poles, the picture of Prabhupada was put, and a cloth was put over that. And very quickly they built a kutir, and after the first arti was performed, then the Ayodhyapati, he became the pujari. They started making the offerings. And because you have to remember that Srila Prabhupada, he incorporated Iskcon in 1966. It was now 1977. That means that the devotees, no one was older than 11 years old in Krishna consciousness. They were just little children. Just like the Pandavas, they were also just little children when Pandu died, and they were put in the care of people who wanted to kill them. Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, they were constantly making plans to kill the Pandavas, these young little boys. So the devotees were also, where's water? Also in a very precarious situation, both from within and from without. We heard yesterday how the Bajaj group, this Gita Pratishtan, they went out of their way to come here to ask Prabhupada, who's going to lead Iskcon when you leave? They were just waiting to step in and take over this worldwide organization. So we had a lot of people, practically like predators, waiting till Prabhupada left. Even some of his godbrothers, even some members of the Gaudiya Math, as soon as Prabhupada left, drawing disciples away from Iskcon. And within Iskcon, we had problems also, because everyone was so young. They felt they needed guidance. Sometimes they would take guidance but actually get misguided. So, and Srila Srila Prabhupada, we can look at his correspondence on another day, about who would succeed him so far as initiations were concerned. We heard yesterday in the first prelude to the play, where Tamal Krishna Goswami said that he had 200 disciples, 200 devotees waiting to take initiation. So very early in Iskcon, Prabhupada set up a system where the devotees who wanted initiation were recommended by the temple presidents or the GBCs. And on their recommendation, although sometimes he never even met the devotees, some disciples of Prabhupada never even saw him because they were in far-off countries like Argentina, and devotees were poor. It's so expensive to come out of the South American countries, different places. So on the recommendation of the GBCs or the temple presidents, Prabhupada would initiate disciples, give them their names, and the second initiated disciples, either they would hear a tape of Prabhupada chanting the Gayatri Mantra, or the person assigned, for instance the GBC, they would chant on behalf of Prabhupada into the ear of the new Brahmin. So this had been going on since the 70s, the very early, that Prabhupada had this system of initiation by recommendation. So now, since Prabhupada expected that he would be leaving, he decided upon, I think it was 11 or 12, the list is there, which disciples, because they had already been doing it on his behalf, now which disciples would accept disciples. For instance, and Prabhupada had told this to several devotees, sometimes the children, they wanted to take initiation, but they were too young. And Prabhupada said, no, he's not my disciple, he will be the disciple of my disciple. There are examples. I didn't prepare for that today. We're on a different topic today. But we can discuss it later. So there were some senior disciples who were not happy with the system that Srila Prabhupada set up of these 11 or 12 disciples being the only ones to accept disciples. And it was a very heavy responsibility for those devotees also. What finally evolved was these new groups that Prabhupada, in all of his books, he said should all become gurus, and we can all become gurus, but actually Prabhupada, they had a really way out philosophy. And it hadn't been exposed yet. It was underground. There were some leaders within the movement. Now, we didn't know anything about this here in Vrindavan until one day. It was because Srila Prabhupada left in November, and in those days there was only one GBC meeting per year, and that was the Gaur Purnima time. So March of 1978, they had to make these decisions about how to start the initiations and the zonal acharyas. And at that time in India, for all of India, you notice we only had 4 major temples. All of India was under one GBC, and that was Gopal Krishna Das Adhikari. So after Prabhupada wrote his will, and there were 3 trustees for Vrindavan Temple, and because Guru Kripa Swami had collected all the money for the Vrindavan Temple, and now Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi had to be constructed, what the GBC decided was that since Guru Kripa built the whole temple and collected all the money for the temple, they wanted to make Guru Kripa now the GBC for Vrindavan, and it would be then his responsibility to collect all the money for Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi. Now, Guru Kripa was very unhappy with that decision. his idea was, Srila Prabhupada is the founder acharya of all of Iskcon. The Samadhi is not a local temple. The Samadhi is Srila Prabhupada's resting place. And he felt that all of the temples in the world should contribute to build the Samadhi of Srila Prabhupada. It was going to cost $1 million minimum to build just the Samadhi. That wasn't even including the museum portion. And he had just spent 5 years of his life collecting day and night to build the temple. He was exhausted. But this is what the GBC decided, because the whole rest of the world, the preaching had to go on in all the different zones of all the different GBCs, and they had to concentrate on their zones. And this zone, they wanted Guru Kripa to be the GBC and take charge of the Samadhi construction. So he was very depressed by this. And they also cut up into different sections India. They had the eastern side, that was one set of GBCs. They had Vrindavan, they had the northern, they had the western, they had the southern, like that. So I don't know who all the GBCs were. I just know that from March 1978, Guru Kripa Swami became our GBC. And he brought with him his men, the Namahatta party. At that time, his assistant was Yashodanandan Swami, who was already here because Prabhupada asked him to help with the Gurukul, help Dr. Sharma. So he was already here, and Akshayananda Swami was still the temple president, but Akshayananda Swami, there was a personality conflict. So very soon afterwards, Akshayananda Swami left. And he left in a very disgruntled mood. So not only did he leave Vrindavan, but he also left Iskcon and went to one of Prabhupada's godbrothers to take guidance. Quite a few senior disciples at that time, because they weren't happy with this new management system, left and were taking shelter of some of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers, which was completely against Srila Prabhupada's instructions. But this is what they chose to do. So then we only had Guru Kripa and his men here, and they were all very staunch brahmacharis, and there were only a handful of devotees here at that time. And they wanted, one of the first things they did was, at that time, maybe there were 10 women. The brahmacharis had moved to the upper floor of the Gurukula building, and the women were given the inner ashram of the guest house. So the women were all staying in the inner ashram. And one night at 2 o'clock in the morning, the temple commander came and knocked on all the doors of the women and said, "You've got till Mangalarti to get out of Vrindavan. We're kicking all the women out of Vrindavan." They kicked all the women out except for the women who originally Prabhupada said could stay, the widows and the wives of the devotees who were serving here. So I think 3 of us got to stay. The wife of Hari Sori, her name was Mohini Shakti, myself, and Nirmala, the wife of the head pujari Omkara. Other than that, all the women had to flee by the next day. There were no women left in Vrindavan. And Guru Kripa, he was out trying to collect money, and he became depressed. Yashodanandan was then made the acting president, temple president, and he put his men in charge of the different departments. And some of these men, because they always had to come and go from Japan, they were always getting kicked out of Japan, they would go to America, they would get new names and new passports and come back. In those days, they didn't have, you know, biodata, checking your irises and your fingerprints, all that stuff. You just had to make a new name, get a new passport, and then they would come back to Japan. So some of them had funny names, like names related to Krishna. So the Indian government, they're not dumb. They know when someone's doing something wrong, you know. So they found out that some of the devotees who were staying here, they had these funny Indian names when they were American. So a lot of the men had to leave very quickly because the government was investigating them. So the management became smaller and smaller and smaller, and Guru Kripa himself, while he was trying to collect, he was in Amsterdam, and the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, they were watching him, and they suspected that he was doing something illegal. They put him in jail to observe him. So he ended up in jail. His men were reducing regularly, and one day Yashodanandan, because we only had that one typewriter in the temple, and I happened to be the secretary at the time, he asked me to sit in this little room and type a very important paper. I just, whatever the temple president tells me to do, I'm going to do what he tells me to do. So I start typing this paper. And this paper was the manifesto of the Ritviks. And it was the most ridiculous thing I had ever read in my whole life. I typed about 5 pages of it. And then I took this ridiculous paper, I took it to Yashodanandan's room, and I threw it at him, and I said, "This is hogwash. I'm not going to type this. You find another typist." So they took the typewriter away from me for a week. We couldn't do any of the life member work, nothing. And somebody else typed their ridiculous Rittvik manifesto, and it started circulating. So this was it was so early, January of 1979. The GBC then found out about it, that this Rittvik philosophy was being circulated from Vrindavan temple. And because they were going to be meeting in February for the GBC meetings, they came a month early. The entire GBC suddenly arrived here one day to investigate what is this whole Rittvik movement going on here, starting from Vrindavan. So they removed Shodanandan Swami, and they removed all of his men, and they temporarily put in his place Prabhu Vishnu Das, who was a brahmachari. He had been assigned to preach in Bangladesh and Nepal, different places by Prabhupada. He was a very, very good preacher in India already. And so he accepted the responsibility, he and Gunarnava, because Prabhu Vishnu had to travel also to the different temples that he was making, and Gunarnava was always here. So it was the two of them in that interim time until the GBC decided who the new GBC was going to be for Vrindavan. Guru Kripa unfortunately was sitting in jail until they figured out what he had done wrong. They couldn't figure it out. And Yashodanandan had to leave because he was heading up this Rittvik society. And we now had a new temple president, and it took a month until the GBC had their meetings, and then they decided who the new GBC was going to be. Now in Mayapur, there were two GBCs at that time. It was Jayapataka Swami and Bhavananda Goswami. They were there building Mayapur. They had received from Prabhupada so many instructions how to build the project. And Bhavananda was also the GBC for Australia and New York. Two very wealthy, well-established yatras. So they decided that Bhavananda should be the GBC here because he would have enough influence and enough financial support to build Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi. So along with Bhavananda came many new, from this time onwards we had like different waves of devotees depending upon who our GBCs were. So now the brahmacharis had moved on. Now we had a wave of Australian devotees and Bengali devotees leading the management. And the whole thrust was we had to get Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi built. Already a year had gone by. No, it was 1979 already then. And the Samadhi was just starting. So I made some, a little slideshow here of the Samadhi. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to separate it chronologically. But we can look at the pictures, and if there's anything, like this is a later picture, you can see because the steps are there. Now, until 1994, the entire front of the temple was a construction site. So you see where this little tree is here? Over here, you know, if you go over there, right now we have the welcome center and we have the water tap. Well, that was the main entrance of our temple. They broke that wall and they put the temple gate there. So from 1979 until 1994, that was the entrance of the temple. And they made a little window there because Prabhupada wanted the kitri to be distributed every day. They made a window and they distributed there, from there, the kitri every day. This is an earlier picture. Now Surabi, he made an absolutely beautiful design for the Samadhi, and he made it so that it would last 500 years. Everything was reinforced concrete, even the shikar, solid concrete, so that the Samadhi there would be absolutely no way that the Samadhi could deteriorate. Whereas our temple, our Gurukula, and our guest house, they were all made with bricks and cement. And the philosophy behind that was, if one section deteriorates, it can be rebuilt. So in that way, all the buildings could be rebuilt as they deteriorate. It would be the same building, but it could just, in sections, it could always be rebuilt. So, but this they did differently. He made everything reinforced concrete. You see all that white there. No bricks are there. So that it could last 500 years at least. That was very expensive to do, and it took a long time. And then you'll see here these designs. If you ever go to Prabhupada's Samadhi and look at the different designs, how Surabi designed these, see these things. Well, there's a very famous building in New York City called the Chrysler Building. And he took the design from that, he was telling me one day. Because the entire Samadhi was designed by devotees. He didn't have any outside designers. See that design there? That's from the Chrysler Building. They had in the bottom floor of the Gurukula a big Samadhi office. And they had draftsmen, that was one thing. Everyone cooperated, all the temples cooperated to send their best men for this, who had any architectural design experience. And they just designed every single detail, the pigeons, everything. And Surabi wanted everything to be very simple, because it was a samadhi, it wasn't a temple. A very simple design, without a lot of elaborate things. And after he left the construction, they changed that and they started making it very elaborate. And he wasn't happy about that. So, wait a minute, I have to get back into... Okay, we're up to this one. Yes, so this is the final. See, these things, all of this was designed by the devotees. But these things, Surabi wanted to be very simple. But like this arch was made at the very end, so they made it very fancy. So he wasn't happy about that. He wanted everything to be much simpler than what it is now in the original design. All of this, the ceiling was all designed by the devotees. And 1983, the entire inside of the samadhi was scaffolded, so the workers could be up on the top of the scaffolds with these big bamboo poles, putting in this plaster ceiling. It's a very complicated ceiling. You can go in and see it one day. And everyone was going to arrive the next day for the grand opening of Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi. And Surabi came in the night before to look to see how the ceiling was. It was all ready. So he said, okay, take everything down. He meant take all the scaffolding down. But the workers misunderstood him, and they spent the whole night taking the whole ceiling down again. So the next morning when Surabi came in at Mangalarti time, he had a heart attack, practically, when he saw that they had taken the whole ceiling down again. So quickly they had to go put everything up again. And the same with, he was trying to rush. It was all happening at the same time, 1983. He wanted to move the Govinda's restaurant from the first floor down to here. So he was rushing the workers, and there's a marble floor here. It used to be the marble chips like this. But he wanted a marble floor to make it first class. So one set of workers started from one end, the other set of workers started from the other end, and that same night before, they met, and nothing matched. So he made them dig up the whole one half of it so that it would all be done properly, because you couldn't have all zigzags right in the middle of the floor. He was very precise about everything that he did. He was a perfect designer and architect. So poor Surabi really suffered a lot trying to get this samadhi built and the restaurant built all at the same time. Here we have finished. This is the design that he took. Very beautiful design. All of this is hand carved. There were two sets of carvers. There's a place in Rajasthan called Makrana. Has anyone ever been there to Makrana? Yes, you went there? It's where the quarries are for white marble. And it used to be black marble, but now they've used up all black marble in the quarries. So now it's only white marble. So we had Thakur Vijay Singh. He was our contractor, and he was the Thakur, you know, he was like the Maharaj of Makrana, who arranged all of the marble work for Prabhupada's Samadhi, because Surabi wanted everything to be pure marble. He couldn't do it with the temple, but he definitely wanted it done with the Samadhi. And Bhavananda was able to collect all the funds between Australia and New York. So this was going to be the best class that Surabi could possibly do. So the two teams were, they would cut the marble and they would make a rough design. None of these holes would be there in Makrana, because from Makrana, in the middle of Jaipur, in the middle of Rajasthan, they'd have to bring it on lorries to Vrindavan. And then they had a second set here to do all of the fine carving, get all the holes out, you know, things like that. Even if you look at our lordships, Sri Sri Gaur-Nitai, when they were sent here, when they send Gaur-Nitai deities, they always leave a piece of marble between their index finger and their thumb so that their fingers won't break in transit while they're being transported. And then the carver is supposed to come and take away that little piece. But the devotees were afraid to take the piece away. So there's always two sets there. When it's being carved originally and when it reaches the destination, you have to finish the carving and make it fine. So we had the carvers here. That's what the whole front of the temple was. All those carvers were doing the fine handwork of this marble. Then they made this very fancy design of the beautiful peacocks going up the steps. Now here, these two spaces were supposed to be fountains, because here is where the fountains originally were. But they had to remove the fountains because they had to level everything. So then Sarabi wanted these two fountains here. He had all the plumbing put in, everything. But then they never made it. We did have it as fountains in the beginning, but then they removed the fountains and put dirt in. Devotees can go up here. There's a little ladder. You can walk across. And here also, the idea was that devotees, like the women, could go up here. In our Los Angeles temple, they also have a balcony like we have here in this Samadhi. And the women, they're upstairs when it was very crowded. They would go upstairs. So in the early days when the Samadhi was first built, and we had our Srila Prabhupada disappearance festivals right in the Samadhi, so then the women would go upstairs there. But it's not being used anymore, so now whoever wants to go up there can go up there. Now, the purpose of having two sides was, one side was dedicated to Srila Prabhupada's Vapu, and that's where his body is, where his Vapu is. That's the Samadhi side, the left-hand side. The other side was dedicated to Srila Prabhupada's Vani, and that means the BBT wanted all of Prabhupada's books distributed there, and all of Prabhupada, everything about Prabhupada's books and his life, like that. So that's why it was called a museum. So later on, when it wasn't being developed along the lines of, for BBT, for Prabhupada Vani, the BBT stepped in and they made a steering committee. That was in 2015, 2016, and that was when we made what's presently there now, with all the BBT dioramas and the book stalls, so that all of the books would be available as people come out of the temple. You'll see in these early pictures there's no, divisions with because that was all done later. We have those railings to direct the traffic, because we were having trouble with pickpockets. People were going in and coming out at the same time, and the pickpockets were having a festival every day. So now we have one place where people go in and one place where people come out, and then they go into the Prabhupada BBT Museum, and then they exit. So that was the traffic idea for the Samadhi. Now this is when they announced in November, December 1994 that finally the front gate of the temple is going to be reopened. So officially, it took till 1994 for the construction to be complete of the Samadhi. 1977 to 1994. How many years is that? 77. Let's see, 7, and then 9. 17 years? Or 27 years? Which? 17 years. It took 17 years to complete. Now, even while this was written, that the front gate is open, the first thing it says they still need $30,000 to complete the museum. So Prabhupada's Samadhi was ready after 17 years, but the museum still had to be completed. The museum was the same as Prabhupada's. It was all open before. You see all of these open jollies. It was all open like that up on top, but then it got closed later on by different managers. This is a view of how our temple used to look like. It was quite narrow before. These columns were built because Bhavananda himself, he was a very good designer. That's what he used to be before he became a devotee. So he wanted to make an archway, right? See these tubs here? There were going to be plants put into that, like malati or some very nice flowering vines. And they would be connected to the corresponding columns here along the temple, so that everything would be beautifully decorated with flowering vines along the side. And then here we had, I remember one day we were trying to get the garden in order right after the construction, and we were deciding, well, should we have the garden on this side of the temple or on this side of the temple or in the, nobody really knew how to make the garden. So we decided to have the garden on both sides. So garden was along the temple wall, and then there was garden also along the outside wall, and this narrow passageway. But then over the years, it was recommended that we remove this garden because it was going to affect the foundation of the temple in the years to come. So that's why we have a much wider walkway now. And also so many more devotees, we need more room. This is during construction time. You can see how they have, now this is the typical construction site in India with all the bamboo poles. There was no metal scaffolding at that time, all bamboo. Now, when Prabhupada was finally installed, 1984, 1983, they had wonderful, wonderful offerings to Srila Prabhupada. This was on one of his disappearance days. Another early picture of here. This is Sarabi with the workers looking at the blueprint. This is, they had they were doing both at the same time, the Samadhi and the museum, trying to complete them at the same time. Finally they gave up and just concentrated on the Samadhi. This is Maheshwar. He was assisting Bhavananda. Now this is in 1983, when, was it 83? 83 or 84, it had to be 83, when the Murti that was sent from America finally got through customs, because to receive such a big Murti, they had to get special authority. And one devotee named Raghavananda Prabhu, he was able to do that with his connections in Delhi. So he brought Srila Prabhupada. And then we had a big abhishek for Prabhupada in the courtyard of the temple. And then Prabhupada was so heavy, it took about 10 men to carry him. And what I had done was, for this abhishek, I had brought all of Prabhupada's original towels that he actually used for them to dry off Prabhupada's body. And then at the end of the abhishek, Bhavananda cut up one of them and distributed that towel to everybody as Mahaprasadam. but then all the other towels had to be washed. So I had to take all those towels and run here to Prabhupada's bathroom and quickly wash out all the ghee and the honey and everything. And while I was here in Prabhupada's room, I suddenly hear the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my whole life. It was hundreds and hundreds of devotees all at one time chanting, "Jai!" And that was when the 10 devotees that were carrying Prabhupada, they finally carried Prabhupada into the Samadhi, and they just couldn't get him he was too heavy to pick up and put onto his Samadhi sitting asana. So finally, Brahmananda got underneath Prabhupada and with his head pushed him up and put him on. And that was when the most beautiful sound, no one has ever heard a sound like that. It was so wonderful. And they had all the press here, and we had a big press conference. It was a very big occasion when finally Prabhupada was installed in his Samadhi. Excuse me? He's doing the Artik, yes. Yes, whatever his condition whatever, he did a lot of service to build Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi by bringing the funds from his... Actually, Australia was considered our sister temple at the time because they were supporting the whole temple. He brought ACs for the deities for the first time, 3 ACs, and at that time, when the guest house was built, nobody had enough money to paint the guest house. It was just gray cement. So he painted the entire guest house inside and outside, and the temple, and Prabhupada's house. He made into the museum, and then got the Samadhi opened, and then, for whatever reasons, 1983, yeah, that's why it had to be 1983 that this installation was made, because 1983 he was removed as GBC, Sannyasi, and Guru. He went back to Mayapur, and that's way down the road. We didn't have a GBC for a few months. It was very tough, because he took all of his men with him. We had a very tough time for a few months until they assigned somebody. Then finally, after that, they got smart. They brought back Gopal Krishna Maharaj. And he assigned Navyogendra Swami to be the temple president. But the problem was Navyogendra Swami didn't have enough men. So we didn't have enough men for the management, so that didn't last very long. It lasted about a year. So this is the very early stages of the construction, you can see. They would decorate very nicely. This was before that arch was made. Before the marble arch was made behind Prabhupada, we had a copper arch made out of copper. It was made here, it was cast here, everything was done right here in one of the shop that says gift shop in front of the Gurukula. That was where they did all the casting and the bronze designing. It was amazingly done. They made a wax, just like you would do with any metal. They made a wax design, then they cast that, and then they put the copper over it and chipped into it. It's very wonderful how they did it. So we had marble, we had a copper, and then we found Ramji Lal. Ramji Lal he was one of the 5 top mysteries who did our temple. So one day I saw another one, his name was Muni Lal. I saw him and I said, "Can you come and help with our Samadhi now? We need some mysteries, top-class mysteries." He said he wasn't doing the work anymore, but Ramji Lal was still here. So we got in touch with Ramji Lal, and we brought Ramji Lal back to do the work. So then he made that whole, arranged for that whole marble one to be built. So then we could, because the copper was, you know, copper gets dark, so the marble now is much nicer. Here are the shining, what they're called, chhatris. Yes. Okay, so now we've seen. Achyuta came in the 90s. Not very, he wasn't there. Tosan Krishna, Hansa Rupa. Well, we'll hear about that later, because after Bhavananda left, then the construction just stopped because there was no more money coming in. So the temple devotees themselves here in Vrindavan made a committee called Samadhi Now. We'll hear about that in a few days, because that's all the way, you know, it's 10 years down the road. And that was when Achyuta came, long after. Okay, so we're finished with this Samadhi section. Now there's one other section I wanted to show today, and that is here in Prabhupada's house, because in Prabhupada's Elmira, where all of his personal things were kept, in 1979, when we were able to open up the Elmira for the first time, we found some beautiful things there, and also the things that Bhavananda brought from Mayapur, because they were going to be combined here in Vrindavan. And first, in those early days, we displayed them all for the public to see. But some things were starting to get stolen from Prabhupada's house. That's why we now have that glass barricade. There was one sadhu who used to come very religiously every night and offer his dandavats, because we used to just have a velvet cord between where the people would go and Prabhupada's bed and his desk. So he would very, very devotedly offer his dandavats to Srila Prabhupada underneath the velvet cord. And I just happened to be looking in the window one day from the bookshop, and I saw, as he was offering his dandavats, he had grabbed a brass pot that we had under Prabhupada's desk and put it under his chadar. And I went to catch him, but he ran out, so the chowkidars went running after him to find him, you know. And so we discovered very fast that we had to be really careful. Even one time we had a festival here, it was a Gaur Purnima festival, and we had all of Prabhupada's silver and all of his original things out, thinking that it would inspire the devotees. And we had the little kartals that the devotees used to play for Prabhupada. Someone stole the kartals. And then we had Prabhupada's, we'll see these, Prabhupada's little tilak cup. It was made out of silver. Well, they didn't steal the cup, but they stole Prabhupada's original tilak. So we knew it was a devotee. I mean, who else would steal tilak? So they had to make announcements every morning after Mangalarti, please, anyone who borrowed Prabhupada's tilak, please return it. Finally, one brahmachari, you know, very humbly, he returned the tilak, you know.
You didn't beat him that time?
Huh?
You didn't beat him that time?
You're not going to beat him. I mean, he returned it. Other people we beat. Now, before Prabhupada's house was open, oh, this was terrible. The bust of Prabhupada was on his desk, and we had a picture of Prabhupada that we used to worship. We were all alone then, only Prabhupada disciples would come, and it wasn't open to the public. But one sadhu, these sadhus are they're the worst. He was coming in every day to offer his obeisances, and then I come in after him, and the picture of Prabhupada had disappeared. Now, why would someone steal a picture of Prabhupada? And I knew it had to be him because he was the only person who came in. And I'm just, devastated. They were having me go to Mathura in those days to preach to the wives of the DM and people like that. So I went to Mathura, and I came back. I was walking from the bus stop. It was a long walk, but I was so upset. I walked back because I just couldn't figure out how to get that picture back. And I saw the man, this sadhu, walking right towards me. And he had a bag. And I said to him, let me see what's in your bag. He opened up his bag, and there was the picture of Prabhupada. So I grabbed the picture and I started running. So the next morning, he comes to Mangalarti. And I run to Dr. Sharma, our principal. I said, that man, he stole a picture from Prabhupada's house yesterday. What the man did was, he walked right into the pujari room, and he was going to start stealing stuff from the pujari room. So the chokidars grabbed that man. They beat him so bad, he never came back to the temple again. So some people did get special mercy. But they didn't beat that little brahmachari, because he... One devotee even stole Rupa Goswami's original Japamala from the Radha Damodar temple. And how are you going to make spiritual advancement by stealing from Rupa Goswami? So, anyway, I just wanted to share some of these things with you, the things that we found in Srila Prabhupada's Elmira. This is Prabhupada's passport. And it's right here in Prabhupada's prasadam room. All of these things you can see if you go around the house. I'll just give you a little introduction to what's here in the house. So this is Prabhupada's, his last passport that he had. And you can see the distinguishing marks as Hilak on it, things like that. And his father, he gave as his father's name, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. This is just a photocopy of it. We sent the original one to the archives for preservation.
That time the government did not object whatever the name putting the father name.
No, it's a law. You're allowed to do that. If you're a sadhu, you're allowed to give the name of your guru. Even now, you can do that. Devotees can do that. Oh, so this is the palanquin that you see here, Srila Prabhupada, as we saw yesterday in the movie, with his sunglasses on. And this is what he would go on parikrama with. So this original palanquin is there in Prabhupada's prasadam room. Now above him, this was embroidered by a disciple of Prabhupada named Sri Gopika. So this is a pillow that Prabhupada used to sit on. They would put a cloth over it for Prabhupada to sit.
Where he used to sit on this?
On there, so far as I know, yeah.
On the palanquin.
Yeah, so far as I know, that's what they told me, yes. Now this Murti of Srila Prabhupada, this was the writing Murti, the first one that we got. But this Murti was supposed to go to be worshipped at Prabhupada's room at Radha Damodar. And the asan that Prabhupada's sitting on, there were two asans like that Jamuna made. If you see the old pictures of Radha Damodar, Prabhupada had a very simple asan to sit on. It was just like some cut wood. And then Jamuna had these two asans made for Prabhupada. So we brought one of them here, she brought one of them here when the house was built, and one of them is still at the Radha Damodar quarters where Prabhupada is. So this Murti was supposed to go down to Radha Damodar, but the person who was looking after Prabhupada's house, the day that they brought the palanquin, they were going to put Prabhupada on, and then the person looking after Prabhupada's house at that time would not let them take the murti. So they had to quickly find another murti, and they found one that Bhaktisiddhanta Das had made. So that's the murti that's now being worshipped at Prabhupada's room at Radha Damodar. Now these pictures, these were brought by the artists at the grand opening time. One is the famous picture when Krishna is taking prasadam with his friends. The other one is when Mother Yasoda is feeding Krishna. So when we had to put these pictures up, I decided they would be the right pictures to put in Prabhupada's prasadam room. But then this upper picture, when Prabhupada walked in the room for the first time, when he came back in 75, in August 75, he saw that picture and he started going like this, imitating Krishna Balaram. This cane, there was a devotee, a grihastha couple here, Vishal and Vishalini. So they got a cane just like this, made for Srila Prabhupada. But that cane, at the same time, Kirtananda brought a cane for Prabhupada that they had made at New Vrindavan. So this might be the original cane that they had made, or it might be the New Vrindavan one. Somehow or other they got switched around. But this is the cane that Prabhupada used to use when he was here. It's silver with gold plating, made by the devotees. These are, when Prabhupada had his bathroom here, his first bathroom was in the closet, what's now Prabhupada's closet. So he came in, and it was 1974, he needed shoes. So I only had my wooden shoes to give. So I quickly brought my wooden shoes for Prabhupada. And they were, of course, too small for Prabhupada, but it was all we had. So he used those shoes and then came out and said they were too small. So while he was in the bathroom, I ran and told Omkar, I said, we have to get shoes for Prabhupada right away. He needs them for the bathroom. So he ran downtown and got these shoes for Prabhupada, and they were Prabhupada's bathroom shoes. So after Prabhupada disappeared, we gave those bathroom shoes to Omkar because he had given them to Prabhupada. So then Omkar, being the head pujari, he got those shoes silver-plated very beautifully, and they were being worshipped in Prabhupada's Samadhi. But then we decided that, because things were getting stolen left and right, we decided to lock up those shoes. So we only bring these shoes out once a year, Prabhupada's disappearance day, and we touch everybody's head with Prabhupada's shoes on that day. So if you want to see these shoes, you have to come on Prabhupada's disappearance day. Now this was the little mirror that Prabhupada puts his tilak on with, and this is the little loda that the water, and here's the spoon to take the water to put in his hand. And this was the compact that Hari Sori wanted. So he got a new one made for Prabhupada. And we'll see that new one. This is a cup. You know how Prabhupada, he would never touch the cup to his mouth. He would pour it. So Palika had this made for Prabhupada, very beautiful silver cup, so the Prabhupada could easily pour it with the rounded opening, the rounded mouth. And then that's a straw. It's a solid gold straw that some grihastas named Sulo Chandas and Sulo Chandasi, they got for Prabhupada. And when he would drink his dabs, we'd use that straw for Prabhupada. Because we didn't have dabs in Vrindavan in those days. You had to, Prabhupada would take his dabs in Mayapur then. So that straw would travel with Prabhupada, and that's why Prabhupada locked it up in his Elmira there. This is a set of silver plates that were given to Prabhupada, and this is a solid gold spoon, because Vishalini, when she heard that Prabhupada was taking the medicine that the Kaviraj was making, she took her golden bangles and got them melted down to make this golden spoon for Srila Prabhupada. And it has an engraving on it, His Divine Grace. So that was Prabhupada's medical spoon, medicine spoon. There's the spoon. These are the golden buttons that Palika made for him. This is a Seiko watch. Now, Seiko watches are very expensive, they're very accurate, they're like the best watches you can have. But Guru Kripa had gotten a Seiko watch for Prabhupada. We showed this Seiko watch to Guru Kripa. He said, this is a fake Seiko. So it's not the one that, all this time we had been keeping it, thinking it was the real Seiko watch that Guru Kripa gave him, but somebody exchanged it. This is a fake, I'm sorry to say. We only found that out last year. Now this is the solid gold compact that Hari Sori made for Prabhupada. We all know what that beautiful picture is. We can make it bigger. Yes, there's Krishna Balaram in solid gold.
The same design.
Yeah, exactly the same. So beautiful. Now these are, we've tried to segregate the different display cabinets into different themes. These are the things that Prabhupada used for his bath, his towels, and his different massage oils, Mahabringaraj oil, mustard oil with camphor in it. He had a Listerine bottle. Now here, this was 1 liter of sandalwood oil that was given to Prabhupada by Shruti Rupa Mataji. And Prabhupada he would have mustard oil on his body, and on his head they would put the sandalwood oil. So Prabhupada always smelled like a deity. And then there's rose water. We used to use that when we ground down here. Yes, this is the sandalwood, and we would use the rose water. Sometimes Prabhupada would use Vicks, and this is Prabhupada's lota that he took with him everywhere, traveled everywhere with him. This might be Prabhupada's clipper when they had to shave Prabhupada's head, and the oil that goes with it to keep it in good condition. These are, Prabhupada used to make his own toothpaste. Actually, Prabhupada wouldn't even use toothpaste. We would go out and get neem twigs for him, and then we would crush the edges, the end of one of the ends, so it would be soft like a brush, and we would soak those neem twigs in a glass of water and always keep them in his bathroom for him, so they would be ready for him in the morning. And sometimes Prabhupada had a bridge. Sometimes Prabhupada would leave his bridge of teeth. He had like a few back teeth of a bridge. He would leave them in the bathroom, so I get to clean his teeth for him regularly whenever he left them in the bathroom. This is Prabhupada's massage mat that he would carry with him. It was a foldable one, so he could use it anywhere, and easily his servants could easily pack it. And his manicuring set, and all you can all go see this yourself after the thing. This is a whole container of saffron that was left over after Prabhupada left, so we just kept it intact like that. Prabhupada's hand razor. One time, Shrutakirti, he got an electric shaver. And, you know, electric shavers make noise. So Prabhupada, bzzz, you know, Prabhupada, he heard the noise and he came and asked what it was. He tells this story sometimes. So Shrudakirti asked him, is the noise disturbing you? And he said, no, but for hundreds of years we've just been shaving ourselves with a simple razor. Why do you need an electric razor, you know? Prabhupada couldn't understand it. This is a hand fan. It's upside down. There's a design on the other side that was sewn by Pishima for Prabhupada, because it was the standard. Everyone would have their own fans because there would be so little electricity. And sometimes people would have big fans. So like when we were at Bhagavatam class or something like that, they would fan lots of devotees all at one time. So this is the original Vyasa set that Prabhupada sat on when the grand opening was. This is a leaf that was donated by Srimati Mataji from where Prabhupada was born. He was born under a jackfruit tree, I think. Yes. These are the sheets that we used to put on Prabhupada's bed. I used to make his beds every night and set up his mosquito nets. At night he had 3 mosquito nets. He had one for his outside bed. We would put a bed outside for Prabhupada, so if there was a breeze he could sleep out there. We would have one for his inside bed. And we would have a big one that went over his entire desk, so that when he translated, the mosquitoes wouldn't bother him. But still, he called them poka, the little poka, they would come through the screens and come through the mosquito nets and still disturb Prabhupada. And Sadadanya, he tells a story about Prabhupada called him in. He said, come in here, get rid of these poka. You know, they're just born to disturb. You know, so every night I'd have to. Of course, this is before Prabhupada would arrive. He would finish his lecture at 8:30. So from 5 o'clock at night till 8:30 at night, I would wash the whole upstairs all alone, set up the nets, go into the nets, make sure there were no bugs anywhere, set up his sandash and water, and it took practically 3 hours to clean his upstairs every single night, and it had to be perfect. Water had to be thrown every night, and I was getting my rounds done at 11 o'clock at night in those days. So one day I decided, I'm going to be smart, I'm going to train somebody to do the upstairs cleaning, and I'm going to get my rounds done before midnight. So I trained someone up and I showed them how to do everything, and she didn't polish Prabhupada's drinking glass well enough. There was a little spot way in the bottom of it. And Prabhupada saw that spot, and he said, who is in charge of the cleaning? And they gave my name. And I almost lost my service that night because of the spot in the cup. So, and the servant came down and told me, he said, you almost lost your job, you know, because of that one little spot. So then one night, I finished my rounds before midnight, but then after that, every single night, I wouldn't let anybody help me, because I was afraid if they did anything wrong, I would lose my service, you know, because everything would be blamed on me if they did something wrong. So it was a wonderful service, and sometimes Prabhupada would come up early, and I'd get to say Hare Krishna Prabhupada and offer obeisances, then have to run down and make his evening meal. He loved kachoris. He loved when we made kachoris and parathas and sometimes murti and simple things, but when we made kachoris, he was the happiest. And always had sandesh for Prabhupada, so that when he translated at night, he would have something to eat.
If you make sandesh?
Of course.
So did you boil it? Did you
No.
boil it?
No, I didn't.
Just
I mean, because it was fresh. The milk just came, it was all fresh, and just made it like that. I just kneaded it very well. It was kacha. This is from the Radhasundar temple in downtown, one of the original temples. They gave this pajama set for Prabhupada when he did his Antim Yatra. And these are some other chaddars that were given to Prabhupada. This was a piece of cloth that was put on Prabhupada's head. This is every day they would change, they had a little calendar, they would change the date, so it's set there at November 14th. This is some of the salt and some of the dirt that was put into Prabhupada's samadhi. When Prabhupada breathed his last breath, Pishima was at Prabhupada's feet, you saw in the movie. She was taking dust and flowers. So another devotee, Nayana Baram, he did what Pishima did. Whatever was on the bed there, he collected it all and kept it and gave that for us to display. That's dust from Prabhupada's lotus feet. Here is the famous piece of tilak, and that was returned. These are Prabhupada's glasses. You can't see them so well. And I forget what this is. You can go see for yourself. This is a picture of the Antim Yatra, because one of the local photographers, RK Studio, they still function. They're at Anaj Mandi. They took this picture of the Antim Yatra and they gave it to us as a gift. These are some of the towels that were used for Prabhupada when he was sick. This is Prabhupada's harmonium that he used to use when he was here. This is Prabhupada's danda. Now, generally, when a sannyasi carries his danda, after a certain number of years, they can keep it in one place. And usually, when the pure devotee enters into samadhi, his danda is unwrapped, and you know the danda has 3 dandas for the man, tan, the words, body, and mind. That those 3 things are dedicated to the Supreme Lord as Tridandi Sannyasi. And then there's a little danda on top called the Jiva Danda. So usually that Jiva Danda is placed in the samadhi with the body of the vapu of the pure devotee. So they took Prabhupada's Tridandi apart and they brought the Jiva Dandi to the samadhi pit. But then they were told that no, for Prabhupada it's not required. So that way they learned how to they saw how Prabhupada's danda had been made, and from that time onwards, this is the memories of Bhaktivinoda Maharaj. That after that, then they knew how to make dandas properly for the sannyasis, because they saw how Prabhupada's danda was made. This is the early writings of Srila Prabhupada. On the very bottom, we have some of the pages of the medical journal that we had seen maybe last night, the night before. These are some of the things that Srila Prabhupada printed when he lived at the Radha Damodar temple. There's the original covers and the inside cover. Not only did Prabhupada illustrate the outside of the book, but on the inside of that cover is a full description of the spiritual world. This is when Srila Prabhupada took sannyas from Bhakti Pragya Keshav Maharaj, and his sannyas name was Swami. Prabhupada's sannyas name was Swami, and the name Bhaktivedanta had been given to him previously by his godbrothers because of his excellent writing. He could write in Bengali, Hindi, and English very well. So they awarded him the title of Bhaktivedanta. So after sannyas, his diksha name was Abhay Charan Aravinda. So that's the AC, and then Bhaktivedanta, and then Swami. And then the other godbrother that took sannyas the same time was Muni Swami. So that's a picture of the sannyas. These are there were a few of them, but we only have one of them now, the one that Prabhupada was working on. This is the Srimad Bhagavatam in Bengali with the Bengali tikas that Prabhupada used to use for writing his purports. This is dictionary. Sometimes he would refer to that, help the devotees understand some words. In those days, there was no digital. All printing was done with printing blocks. So these were the printing blocks used by Prabhupada for his books. And these are the League of Devotee prospectus in English and Hindi, and other things. These are a letter about all League of Devotees before Prabhupada had established Iskcon. And that's the end of that one. Okay. Now we have some miscellaneous pictures. These are just pictures of Prabhupada's rooms over the year. This was the type of simple desk lamp that Prabhupada used to use. And we always had, this is Radha Damodar from the Radha Damodar bus party that they were given to him by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And this is Radha Londonishwara and Radha Rasa Bihari. Prabhupada always kept that picture with him. His simple bed. This is Prabhupada's hat with the picture of his hat. Devotees. All these things are available. It's just part of the collection that we have. These cups, this is what Jamuna used when Prabhupada lived at the Radha Damodar temple. These brown ones here. Now, when Jamuna was buying all of the paraphernalia for the Krishna Balaram temple for the deities, she thought there would just be 3 plates, one for each altar, because that's usually what we do in temples. So she got some very high quality marble plates. A white plate, a red plate, and a black plate. And all of the katoris were also those colors. And they wanted to use them, but then Prabhupada said there should be 10 plates. So Dhananjaya asked Prabhupada, what's the best thing what's the best type of plate that you can use when you're offering bhoga? And Prabhupada said the best kind of plate is lotus leaves. Well, if you have lotus leaves, you put the prasadam on that. But of course we didn't have any lotuses. So he said you can have silver, or you can have conch, that's bell metal, or you can have stone. So these, because there are only 3, we couldn't use them. But then they got bell metal, everything bell metal for the deities. Now I think they're using silver, right? Yeah. But in those days we could only afford bell metal. And these were being used for Prabhupada, but you'll see the devotees, their habit is they couldn't, a lot of the katoris broke and things like that. So these buckets, when I first came here, I saw that Prabhupada was taking his bath in a plastic bucket. So whatever money I had, I bought 2 buckets for Prabhupada, for him to take his bath, one for the hot water, one for the cold water. Because we used to just put the buckets right on this, one bucket right on the stove, boil the water, and bring it in for Prabhupada to take his bath. He'd mix the water up. And we'd polish these buckets every single day for Prabhupada. He really liked these buckets. So we got these brass buckets for Prabhupada in Calcutta, in Mayapur, in Bombay, and in Delhi. So the Prabhupada would have brass buckets wherever he was bathing. I don't know whether those buckets are still there anymore. These are one set of Prabhupada's Japamali. He had a few sets. So this is one of his last sets. This is a close-up of the Srimad Bhagavat. That's what it says there. And this is a signed copy of the original Bhagavad Gita. Over here is the tape recorder that they used to use for when Prabhupada went on his morning walks. It's portable. Yes, these are some of the broken cups. This is very interesting. Prabhupada had a little diary. Most of the diary was empty, but there was one page. And that page was the points that Prabhupada, when he had the meeting with Indira Gandhi, they had arranged a meeting and Prabhupada flew to India just to have this meeting. But unfortunately, the day before the meeting, the president of the newly formed Bangladesh had been assassinated. Prime Minister, President, I forget what type of government they had. So when Prabhupada met Indira Gandhi the next day, she was in a lot of anxiety and tension because she thought she would be next, because India had supported Bangladesh and India had even sent troops to fight against the West Pakistan. So when Prabhupada met her, he made these points. We can make it a little bigger so you can all read these points. They're hard to read in the display. Here. Number one, Prabhupada was trying like anything to get all of his 500 foreign disciples either citizenship or permanent residence. So that was the first thing on his list, because he knew that until the Indian devotees started joining, the foreigners were going to have to serve here. Then he wanted all the MPs to be initiated Brahmins. And he wanted, just like they have in England, he wanted Indira to be the queen and Sanjay Gandhi, her first son, to be the king. So yes, Prabhupada wanted complete prohibition of all slaughterhouses in India. Before Indira Gandhi, there weren't any slaughterhouses. It was she who gave permission. The first slaughterhouses that she gave permission for were in Tamil Nadu and in Bengal. Before that, there were no slaughterhouses. Then even a slaughterhouse was opened in Mathura after that. Then there should be regular chanting everywhere, kirtan everywhere. If there's any meat eating, it has to be done at home, no public meat eating. Even here, there was complete prohibition at that time. You never saw eggs, or even now you go into Kishorpura, you can see them selling meat on the side lanes. No, it was completely forbidden. No, now you go to Chatikara, they have beer shops, sharab shops, and deshi sharab, all that stuff, bang. None of that was here in those days. And prostitution is punishable, and no religious groups except for Bhagavad Gita as it is. Prabhupada, shoot for the rhinoceros. And there were supposed to be, for all of the officers, they should have kirtan 3 times a day. And of course, Prabhupada wanted Indira Gandhi to support Krishna consciousness all over the world. So these were the points that were found in Prabhupada's little diary for that day when he was going to meet her. But he didn't get to, it wasn't a very successful meeting because she was in so much tension. But later, one of her good friends met Prabhupada and told Prabhupada that she was actually very impressed by Prabhupada and she considered him a saintly person. So then when Prabhupada heard that she liked Prabhupada, Prabhupada immediately called all the sannyasis and GBCs and he said, I want you to start sending bus parties all over India. We have to take advantage of this favorable situation because the Prime Minister likes us. So then they all started bus parties all over the place. after that. Is that the last one? No. How do I get out of this? Where are we? It's here. Just a second. There's much more. These are Prabhupada's glasses. One time I asked Prabhupada, because my father he made eyeglasses. I asked him if we could make a new pair of eyeglasses for him. He was very happy with the eyeglasses he had. And those eyeglasses lasted for some time, but then they were so old, eventually the plastic just melted. I think we just have the pieces here and lenses. This is a picture of Prabhupada wearing those eyeglasses. This is the tape recorder for Prabhupada's morning walks. This is Prabhupada's dictaphone that was purchased by Gargamuni for Prabhupada in the very, very early days. So this helped a lot. And they had many, many of these Grundig tapes, special tapes that went into the tape recorder. They were constantly being used for transcription. They would mail the tapes to compare the transcription with what Prabhupada actually said in order to make Prabhupada's books. The mic. This is Prabhupada's soul. Over here are his godbrothers. They had a magazine called Bhagavad Patrika. And Prabhupada had many, many articles in the Bhagavad Patrika in all 3 languages. So we got from the Chaitanya Mat, the Gaudiya Mat in Mathura. When Prabhupada came from Jhansi, he had a deity of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he gave that deity to the Keshav Gaudiya Mat there. It's right on the main road near Holy Gate. And you can see that Murti. And they also had these very old editions of Bhagavad Patrika. So whatever magazines had Prabhupada's articles in them, we took them out, and some of these articles were made into books. Some of the Bengali books are made from these articles, and the Hindi ones, we have them, but BBT is going to do something with them. This is when Prabhupada left, one of the many, many articles that were printed in the newspapers. This is where Prabhupada used to sit. You can go upstairs, and on this veranda, when Prabhupada was sick, this is where he would sit on his bed, and then he would go over to the rocking chair, and they would carry him down in the rocking chair when the weather was nice, before it got hot. These are the shells. Prabhupada's shoes. These are some of the Prabhupada's Brahmin's threads. I'm sorry, it's just part of the same collection. So, here we have some of the cooking utensils that we use for Prabhupada. See the botis, and one of them there has a coconut scraper. We scrape that. Everything was done Bengali style for Prabhupada in those days. That's what he liked to eat. This was 3. See this picture here? 3 ambassador cars. One for Bombay, one for Calcutta, and one for Vrindavan. So we had Prabhupada's car here. It was registered in West Bengal. This is the license plate, WMC 6016. But the car needed repair. So they sent the car to Mathura one year. Maybe it was 88. It was 88. 89. And we're going to a preaching program in Kurja one evening, and I see Prabhupada. I knew the number because Prabhupada's car was always here. I see Prabhupada's car there in Mathura. So after the preaching tour, I go to the place. I say, why is this car here? I go to the mysteries and they say, well, we fixed the car, but nobody's come to pick it up. It's been here for months. So I went back to the temple managers. I said, you have to go get Prabhupada's car. They said, well, it cost 20,000 rupees, repairs. And they had just changed presidents. The old president, he couldn't pay for it. New president didn't want to pay for it. And the Samadhi didn't want to pay for it. So I went back and I begged them, please, let us have the car. They wouldn't give me the car, of course, so I took the plate. And the car just rotted. The car rotted there. Nobody ever picked it up. Nobody paid the 20,000 rupees. And I asked Gopal Krishna Maharaj, he said, well, we'll get that car, but he didn't get the car, unfortunately. Or we'll get a new car for Prabhupada. Anyway, we have the license plate. And on the side of the car was Prabhupada's name. Now those two cars in Bombay, they're perfectly preserved, and in Mayapur, they're perfectly preserved.
Near the Samadhi,
In the Samadhi?
means just ground floor.
Really?
Garden.
Wonderful. Yeah, you saw already that 28 temple presidents, with so much change of management, it just didn't happen. Now here you have a little sample here. See all the pictures of the gurus? How many are there now? 10, 11? Yes, and these are the Vyasasans that they made. They removed Prabhupada's nameplates, and they made these two Vyasasans. So this is very early. This is like 1979. This Gunarnava. There's Vishal Prabhu. And I don't think any of the other devotees are. This is Omkara and Gunarnava. They're doing a yajna in the temple, maybe an initiation ceremony. Now these are the beautiful ways that we now celebrate. Okay, 7 o'clock. We'll continue then tomorrow. All right. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
There is a couple of questions.
Oh yes.
This Prabhupada car in Bombay, one side took Srila Swami and I was driving the car. And while coming from there, on the way it broke down, then we did repair and it's in Bombay, in basement we have.
In the basement?
We have basement, we keep the car every day, driver clean and he starts the car.
Oh really?
It's going on.
Wonderful.
Another thing you were saying that Prabhupada was alone and he never felt wanted everybody to do Kirtan.
Yes.
And here is my friend. I recommended that he was in cancer and he was about to leave the body.
Yeah.
Got him to do the Kirtan and read Bhagavad Gita. I used to give him prasad and everything. So in the last moment, he is doing Kirtan, his daughter is taking care of him. Then he is going up and he left his body.
Oh, how wonderful.
Here in Vrindavan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When?
Just 2 days back.
2 days back?
Yes.
Who?
2 days back. Amit Kumar Varma. I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful.
He was commando and his wife told me, so I used to take every day prasad to him. He was staying in Keshav Kunj.
Oh.
And later on he went to Pushpanjali
Uh-huh.
and in this devotee they call him.
Oh, how wonderful.
And he left his body.
Now he's left his body.
Yeah.
Oh.
And they,
Oh, here. Barto.
and they cremated him in Jamuna.
Oh, so fortunate.
So I instructed them, they did all that. So
Wonderful. Very
I
nice.
convinced them, they were not devotees, so I convinced them to do what he did.
Not devotees and living in Vrindavan?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. His wife is lawyer. So
Really?
I had contact with him. And she wanted to do so many things with me. This is